Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack on the show, and it's a double dip on a Monday on a Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day to all of you because the Oregon Ducks have secured a verbal commitment for the 2023 recruiting class, guys. Um, they now have landed Kodi Decambra, a four-star safety out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. I think it's one of the most prominent high schools in the country the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. They produce players every year. It seems like they produce state championships in the state of Nevada every single year almost. It's a really good, really well ran football program out west, and Kodi becomes the latest verbal commitment for Oregon and for Dan Lanning in the 2023 recruiting class. They now have 6 verbal commitments. And first and foremost, guys, like a couple weeks ago, maybe even a week ago on a mailbag, we were asked, when are the string of commitments going to be coming? And I think we all kind of agreed we're in that wave right now. This is just the latest one. In the last couple of weeks, Jerion Dickey, you've got Dante Dowdell, Ashton Cozart, and now you've got Cody DeCambra, all in the month of May.
Yeah, it's been a really successful month, right? I mean, the month is coming to a close now, but to land, all those are 5-star prospects. This class, the start of the month, it was small, and I think part of it was you were in spring ball, right? And the staff the attention was focused other places, and now you come out of it, and it's all focused on recruiting, all attention on recruiting, and that's the way it's been with previous staffs. That's the way it's going to be with all staffs around the country. You focus on your team. Of course, you're hosting recruits throughout spring. Oregon had a bunch of guys come through during weekends, had a bunch of guys come through for the spring game back in April. But now it's all hands on deck. It's getting out there, and they've offered a ton of recruits. I just did a recap for the last week. I think if you go through the month, this month has been significantly more offers out there, probably close to 100 this month, whereas the past couple months it was maybe in the 50 to 60 range. Actually, I think probably more than 100 this past month. And now you're seeing it with the verbal commitments, and this is another really positive addition. And we can kind of get into some of the reasons why, Matt. But where does this land Oregon in the rankings?
Yeah, Oregon's now 16th in the top 25. This is a jump of 9 spots. Their previous ranking was 25th in the conference. I think that is a very good sign for where things are going. You mentioned it, Erik, like small class to start with. Cole Martin was Oregon's lone verbal commitment for over 4 months. And now in the last month, they've shot into the top 20. Their per average ranking is pretty good. And you look at DeCambra and you see a guy that's really talented. Washington was one of his finalists. He just took an official visit to Hawaii, of all places. Arizona State were other schools. Washington State had offered. Stanford had offered a scholarship. And Oregon was able to land him for his verbal commitment. He's the 5th highest safety all time to commit to Oregon. This is a big get for the Ducks. They move into that top 20 now, and the way that they're recruiting, they certainly need to add more pieces, but I think you can now have this conversation realistically that they're back in contention for the number 1 spot. They're in the conference. They're not the front runners right now, but they're entering that discussion now.
Yeah, USC's got quite a head start. I don't know where this lands. I know Colorado, I think, was running second for a while. I'm not sure, Matt. You can tell me if that's changed or not.
Yeah, I'll look at it real quick.
But 6 commitments and 5 or 4-star recruits. That's the blue chip rate you would like. And the other kid is a project, but an offensive lineman that, as we've talked about before, in Tavita Pame, is just, you need those big bodies. You don't find him that much out west. He's like a 320-pound, 310-pound nose tackle guy, and you don't find a lot of those guys out west. So, I think you go almost like all 6 of these are quality players. There's not a player that you go, man, that feels like a huge reach. DeCambra, I'll jump into some of the film stuff. I think he really pops. You're not a huge body, 6 foot 170. Athletically, he tested really well 3 years ago. Pretty remarkable numbers, actually. He was at the opening as a freshman and ran a 4.5 340 electric, had a 40-inch vertical. These are great kind of testing markers. We had Gabe Brooks on the podcast earlier today. I guess that went live. And he talked a lot about some of those indicators athletically. And Kodi has those, not at the elite level like you would see for like a top-end corner. But for a high-end safety, he certainly has some of those indicators, and it shows on film. Like, I think he's really explosive. He can be a player that is kind of an enforcer at safety. He's got a couple clips on his highlights where just comes up and decleats guys. My favorite probably comes and you go find his huddle, but like about 2 minutes in, looks like the tight end's going to basically run in scot-free for a touchdown. He just comes and decleats the guy probably at the 5-yard line. And also really effective as kind of like a ball hawk in the back end. Like, I just think he's a very versatile safety prospect, and also a guy who like kind of pops on special teams. I mean, he blocks a punt on the highlights. He has he high points a ball on an onside kick return. Just a lot of kind of intangible things you like to see. And again, like, I don't think he's the flashiest prospect out there, but he's like a guy who makes a ton of plays, and he makes a ton of plays in different parts of the game. So I think, again, a really high-end addition, one of the best safety prospects, one of the better defensive prospects out west, and a guy that I think you feel really good about long-term. I don't know if it's like the highest ceiling guy. Like, I don't know if this is a guy who's ever going to be day 1, day 2 talent in terms of NFL draft stuff, because I think there's some kind of limitations. But at the same time, like, I look at him and think he's somebody who can certainly contribute probably sooner than later in college.
I think one of the main points that you brought up towards the end of that was he's not like the flashiest guy out there on the field, but he makes a lot of fundamental plays. I think that's a really good point, because that's exactly what I saw when I watched a bunch of his tape. He makes plays. It's as simple as that. Whether it's a ball hawk, whether it's coming down on a running back or a wide receiver, hits well above his weight class, I would say. Definitely has a lot of speed coming into any one of his hits. It's an impressive safety prospect. Safety is one of those positions where, you could find an elite guy, but there's plenty of people who could play safeties. But I think Kodi, playing at Bishop Gorman and then going through this next high school season should get more national recognition of the type of player that he is. I think this is a massive pickup for Oregon. I think this really helps them, because this is a position of need, as they have potentially a couple of guys moving on, definitely some guys moving on, but potentially even more moving on after this 2022 season. And this helps solidify it. And, Erik, you mentioned maybe he could even jump in on special teams as a true freshman. He seems to have a similar Bishop Gorman kind of runs a similar defense that Oregon has shown, at least to the spring game. So that could be a benefit to Oregon to have him learn the playbook kind of early and potentially get him in actual playing reps his freshman season. But big pickup for Oregon, and it falls in line with these other strings of commitments in May.
Jared, you spoke with him back in April when he made his visit to the University of Oregon. Is this a shock to you based on the comments he made at that time? And he's obviously since visited other schools, Washington, Hawaii. He got a Stanford offer yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was, which maybe could have thrown some things into a loop there. But based on your interactions with him, are you surprised he picked Oregon?
So I've spoken to Kodi a couple of times, once back in January and then most recently in April. For him to pick Oregon, I didn't see it as a surprise. I think I told you guys that in our Slack channels. I think the total number of visits Kodi has been to Eugene is 4. The first time was 2. I think he snuck one in between the January and April. But no, I mean, his takeaways were, pretty basically what you like to see or hear or read if you're a Duck fan. He said that this last visit to Eugene in April was the best visit that he's ever taken in his life. So that's a good one. He and Coach Matthew Pallage, safeties coach, and Dan Lanning, they've really formulated a bond there. This last time that he went to Oregon in April, they had a whole Sunday dinner at Coach Dan Lanning's house, and that was the first time recruits got there. He said that he really enjoyed his visit in January, but the visit in April just took it up a whole bunch of notches, which is impressive because he was really glowing about his visit in January. I thought it was interesting that he visited so shortly. January to April is a couple months, but that's pretty quick if you're a recruit, and an unofficial nonetheless. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was a good sign for Oregon as well. But he's another Vegas kid that comes to Oregon, joining Sir Mel's and Anthony Jones. Those are two guys who he talked to a lot about his recruitment to Oregon at the time in April, and I'm sure they helped him out in this time during his actual commitment to Oregon now in May.
The impact of this from a positional standpoint, I think, is pretty important. Obviously, Steve Stevens is a junior. We know Bennett Williams is a senior. He has to move on after this season. Jamal Hill is a junior. He could go pro after this season. I think Kodi has the opportunity to play that star position at Oregon. He's really good in the slot. That could be a way for him to get on the field. But then you also look at Steve as a junior. We know Damon David is no longer with the program. We know Triquez Bridges is playing safety again. He's a sophomore. Brian Addison is a junior. This is a position group that is loaded with upperclassmen. And I think even if Jamal Hill comes back and everybody else comes back besides Bennett Williams, I still think there's a chance he gets on the field, just because you want that experience when it rolls into 2024 and Steve's for sure gone, Addison is for sure gone, Jamal Hill is for sure gone. This is an important guy at a position where in 2 years the entire position group could be flipped over.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up the star thing, because I watched him and thought, like, he has the versatility to play probably either deep safety, but I don't know, almost maybe a better fit in the nickel. I'd be curious to hear. Maybe we can get some insight into if they're talking about that sort of a role. I don't know, Jared, did that come up at all when you spoke with him?
It kind of did. He just mentioned how similar the defenses were that Bishop Gorman plays and what Oregon plays, and that, like, how they run a 4-2-5, 5 safeties out there, 5 defensive backs, I should say. But I'd agree that he looks, I mean, when you watch him on the field, he looks more like a star safety fit or a nickel safety fit than someone you just threw out there at deep safety.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too, and that we'll have to be curious to hear if that's kind of comes to light, that that's where they like him most. But no, I'm with you, Matt, in terms of, we didn't mention Trajan Williams, who's in this 2022 class.
Yeah.
In a couple of weeks. That's the other young, but that's like the only other guy who's for sure going to have eligibility, or maybe it will be on the roster come 2024. Like, I think my guess is obviously 2023, he probably doesn't start, but maybe he's in that 2 deep, and by 2024, like, the position class could open up. There's also the transfer portal, so projecting that far out is kind of foolish, but at the same time, I'm with you, Matt. Like, I think there's upside here, and even if it's not a regular role on defense, I mentioned it earlier, I think he pops on special teams, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him contribute there early on. And honestly, safeties, a lot of the time, you kind of see them start to pop earlier on special teams, up in kickoff returns and kickoff coverage and all that stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a name to kind of know in that area, maybe first before on defense.
Do you feel like they've got to go one more? Like, even with Trajan, even with Kodi, you've got Bridges, who's a sophomore. I think they still need to add one more guy. Like, looking at this class and looking at the DB room, and in particular the safety room, one more, right, from a depth perspective.
I would guess so. Yeah. I mean, and we've talked about it. I mean, there's also like the JJ Greenfield component of, like, I don't know.
No, that's true.
He fits, so maybe he plays really well and that changes the discussion. I don't know. But I mean, you talk about Triquez being a sophomore and like Brian Addison's a junior. Those guys have also, like, they're like fourth year.
They've been here forever.
Yeah, they've been here. And Steve Stevens is a junior, but he's been here for Jared. Like, he's like in your freshman class, wasn't he? Like, you like went to class with him.
No, he was a year under me. So this would be I think this is his fourth and final, or should be fourth and final as a class of 20. No, it's actually a year later, class of 2017. So this would be his 5th year.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I know you knew Steve a little bit when you were in college, and I was like, he's could be here for 2 years, but you guys, I thought, were either the same class or pretty close. So, like, I mean, we talked about this before. Like, sometimes you talk about a guy going pro or ending his college career, and people are like, well, that guy doesn't have a pro prospectus. But sometimes it's also like, at some point you just want to move on and kind of
Yeah.
to the next level and see if you can play professionally, start a career in some other fields. I don't know. So like, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if one of these guys ends up just kind of hanging up his cleats, so to speak, after 22, even though there's a year of eligibility, because that COVID thing kind of muddies the water with so many of these classes and stuff.
Yeah. So, and to Matt, to answer your question, they absolutely need another one, just for all the reasons Erik just outlined, of a guy who, despite having eligibility a year or two, whatever the case may be, but just might not want to go to college anymore, which you understand. Jamal Hill could leave early just because maybe he doesn't have the best, maybe he's not the best draft prospect, but he wants to try to see if he can be a professional football player, which is, he has every right to do that. So I'd probably say you need more than one at this point, regardless of how JJ Greenfield works out. He's looked impressive during spring camp. I know that was a long time ago at this point, but I think regardless, they should probably at least get two more, and because they're going to be losing a whole lot of depth and a whole lot of experience. So the more you can get in now, and the more time you can give them in-game experience, practice experience, whatever the case may be, that's going to help you further along down the road when people like Steve Stevens, Brian Ass, and all those guys end up leaving.
One name to watch there is Tyler Turner, a safety from San Antonio. He's got Oregon and Oklahoma, as his top two. We'll visit the Sooners early June, and then end of June, on June 24th, he'll be out in Eugene for an official visit. And if you go and listen to the other podcast today with Gabe Brooks, he was very high on him despite his 3-star ranking. We'll be really curious to see just how maybe things impact. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Tyler decides after his Oklahoma Sooners visit to commit to the Sooners, considering they just landed Kodi at Oregon, who's very similar in body type. But if he does end up taking that official visit, I'd be really curious to see if Oregon emerges out of that visit as the clear-cut favorite. That's kind of how I look at that. If Oregon can get him here after that Oklahoma visit, things are going to look really, really good for the Ducks. That's one name to watch. We've got a couple others on the site that you should be monitoring as well. But looking for one more piece to add to the secondary group at the safety position, and then it's just kind of cornerback from there in terms of filling out that DB room as a whole. But big commitment for the Ducks with Kodi Decambra committing to Oregon. Another 4-star verbal commitment. Matt Powledge, Demetrius Martin were the coaches in charge of recruiting him. Always good to go into the high school of Bishop Gorman as well. They've got one other guy, right, with Trevin Maai, or is there another one that I'm somehow mistakenly forgetting? I don't think there is another one.
I don't know. I just had one quick thought recruiting that's not even Kodi related, but you mentioned June 24th. I just wanted to say, like, for those listening that aren't like diehard recruitniks or whatever the term is, like, that is becoming quickly the big recruiting date. And Matt, you can go look at and see what the Gorman stuff is, but like June 24th, like, I think 4 or 5 5-star recruits are set to be here.
Yeah.
Other high-end recruits are set to be here. Like, it's pretty clear that they're kind of highlighting that as the big recruiting weekend for the month of June and maybe for the whole summer. But I just thought that was a notable thing when you mentioned Tyler Tyler Turner was visiting on the 20th.
Yeah, he's one of many guys that are here, but we know of Jaden Wayne, Caden Proctor, Richard Young, Mateo Ungalele, and then
there's a couple
4-star tight end Riley Williams is going to be here as well. It's June 24th. It's looking like, from a top end perspective, like the replacement to Saturday Night Live in July.
Yeah,
I wonder if they'll still have something like Saturday Night Live though in July.
Yeah. They should. They would
be. I think I would. I love them. So Dan, if you're hearing or listening, excuse me, let's have another one of those. Those are always an enjoyment to go watch. One more quick thing with Tyler Turner. Again, another non-Kodi Decambra player to talk about. Former Baylor commit, Matthew Powledge Baylor commit. Oregon offered him pretty soon after Powledge was officially announced on the staff. I think that's a huge reason why they're getting a kid a kid from Texas, kid from the Midwest to come out and visit Oregon on that big day. I think he'd be a wonderful addition to the class as well. Even though he is, the same position as Kodi. I think that goes back to what I was saying. It's like if you can, I think that's a position you should stack up with for the future.
So to go back to June 24th. That is a big weekend day because Oregon is hosting multiple camps. June 17th, 23rd, 24th. So it looks like that's kind of one of their pitches here is come participate in our camp, get evaluated by coaches, and the big names are also coming out to be here as well. So good stuff all the way around on this verbal commitment. Go to duckterritory.com for more coverage of it. And until we talk to you again, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.